CWT, the latest news from ITN.
From the studios of ITN, the news and sport with Carol Barnes and Graham Miller.
Welcome to the programme. The headlines this Saturday evening. The brother of the nurse murdered in Saudi Arabia says no mercy for her killers. A surprise visitor lends his support to the Manchester Airport protest.
And in sport, Alan Shearer gives England the lead in their World Cup qualifier in Poland.
The brother of the Australian nurse murdered in Saudi Arabia is said to be resolute tonight that her killers deserve to die. It follows the news that the two British nurses charged with murdering Yvonne Guildford have written to him claiming they're innocent. This afternoon, relatives of Deborah Parry and Lucille McLaughlin visited them in Saudi police custody. Neil Connery reports.
For the relatives of the two British nurses, this was a rare and tearful reunion. While they met for 2.5 hours, the question of whether the women will face execution was being weighed up on another continent. Frank Guildford, the brother of murdered nurse Yvonne, received a plea of mercy at his home in Australia. Under Islamic law, he will decide whether Lucille McLaughlin and Deborah Parry face the death penalty if they're found guilty. In the letter, they say their confessions were made under pressure. We signed them under duress, relying wholly on misleading promises of immediate return to the UK and misleading assurances that we would not be subject to Saudi Arabian law. Campaigners fear they're victims of an unfair legal system.
We've got this awful situation where the case is fatally flawed by the looks of everything we've heard. And Guildford is being asked to exercise mercy. I think that the only sensible advice anybody could give him so that he can sleep at nights is tell him that they've so fouled up the investigation he can't be sure that these are the murderers.
But tonight, Frank Guildford's lawyer says he has no wish for clemency for his sister's alleged killers. Their main hope now is that diplomatic pressure on the Saudi authorities will halt any executions. Neil Connery, ITN.
A top-level row blew up in Germany today after the president of the powerful Bundesbank was quoted as saying he wanted the starting date for a single currency to be delayed. Well, in a separate development here, a senior Labour MP called on the Prime Minister to get off the fence over the issue. Here's our political correspondent, Hugh Pym.
The German government wants to keep the single currency show on the road, and Theo Weigel, the finance minister, took time out from a cycling holiday to stress it was politicians, not bankers, who would decide when the single currency went ahead. The question of who will be included at the start will be made by European ministers, he said. A rebuke there to the Bundesbank president Hans Tietmeyer, who was said to have suggested the project should be delayed, though his officials later denied he'd made the remarks. The French election is creating further uncertainty, with the left confident of victory at their eve of poll rally. The new French government is set to be more hostile to the single currency. It's time, says one Labour MP, for Tony Blair to intervene.
I think we should, as a British government, now go to the European governments and say, look, stop this, this is quite ridiculous, this is going to end in chaos. It does nobody any good, it doesn't do Britain any good, it doesn't do Europe any good.
Labour Party sources said Mr Davis's Eurosceptic views were well known, and that policy agreed before the election was to keep options open on joining the single currency. Privately, though, ministers will be happy that the tensions in Germany have deflected attention from whether or not the British government will join at the start of the project. Hugh Pym, ITN, Westminster.
Michael Heseltine, one of the most pro-European Conservatives, says he'll back the former Chancellor Kenneth Clarke in the party's leadership contest. The former Deputy Prime Minister writes in tomorrow's Sunday Times that he believes Mr Clarke stands out as the candidate with the experience, the appeal and the political skill needed to win the next general election. France is going to the aid of 140 Britons still trapped in Sierra Leone. French troops will evacuate them to a French warship along with 45 other Europeans. Tonight, West African countries renewed their warning that they may use force to reverse the coup. Tim York reports.
As protesters gathered at Sierra Leone's London embassy to demand a return to democratic government, it seemed increasingly likely it would be achieved by military intervention. Latest reports from the capital Freetown, these pictures were taken earlier in the week, speak of mounting tension as mutinous troops continue their rampage. Soldiers from neighbouring countries have increased their presence, but so far taken no action. Commonwealth leaders say that could happen within days.
The region is so much against the potential instability that the coup would bring to the region that it would not surprise me if they try to intervene at some point.
That could mean the return of President Kaba, elected last year, ousted 6 days ago in Sierra Leone's third coup in 5 years. 900 foreign nationals have already been evacuated by US Marines. It's now reported that French troops have moved in to take more to safety, including 140 Britons. Tim Hewitt, ITN.
The IRA has planted and then abandoned a landmine in West Belfast, its first terrorist operation since Labour's election victory. They telephoned a coded warning that a device had been left in a van on the city's Polglass estate, but said the bombing attempt had been called off because of civilian activity. People living near Manchester Airport have again lent their support to the protest against a second runway. The former Beirut hostage Terry Waite joined them on his 58th birthday and accused the bailiffs of using Gestapo tactics reminiscent of a fascist state. Sue Turton reports.
The protest took on an altogether more genteel feel today as Terry Waite added his voice to that of local people who will be directly affected by the runway.
Call a halt to this development now!
It's an emotive issue for the former hostage. He grew up in a village next to the airport. He's calling on the new government to put its pledge of a more environmentally friendly transport policy into action.
We cannot allow a transport policy to develop in this country which ravages the environment. Now this government has recognised that, the new government. What we would like them to do is to say, now stop this development until such time as it can be considered in the light of your new transport policy.
My parents are farmers and it's sad for all the land that's going to be taken off them.
And as a child and as a teenager, I spent most of my weekends down here enjoying the beauty of this countryside. And I want it for my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren.
Another protester was arrested after trying to take more direct action. But for the 200 villagers, it was a polite and peaceful protest. Sue Turton, ITN, Manchester Airport.
More than 10,000 students fought pitched battles with riot police today in the South Korean capital, Seoul. The students hurled Molotov cocktails, rocks and bottles. Police responded with brute force and tear gas. It was the latest and most violent protest against South Korea's president, Kim Jong-sam. Police in the Indian capital, New Delhi, are hunting a possible serial killer after the murder of a British woman in a hotel there. They want to find a young Indian man with whom 43-year-old Regina Fleury from Sussex had been sharing a room. And the Pope has ended the first day of a nostalgic tour of Poland by addressing thousands of pilgrims. Vatican officials say Pope John Paul II, who's 77 and in poor health, is well aware the 11-day visit may be the last to his homeland. Britain spent the day basking in sunshine with temperatures beating those in top Mediterranean resorts. Doctors renewed their warning about the link between sunbathing and skin cancer. And for many, the message seems to have got through, as our Wales correspondent Tim Rogers reports.
While some people were flying away in search of foreign sun, thousands of others were soaking up the best of British weather in Wales and the West Country. Many people came out in search of the perfect tan. But in this weather, prolonged exposure to the sun's ultraviolet rays has potentially dangerous consequences. Dr. Richard Mockley has seen a huge increase in the numbers of patients with skin cancer.